Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
I assume Tom.
Steven Feinartz, it is a pleasure to talk to you about your documentary, Are We Good?, which is essentially Marc Maron's catchphrase. So I'll preface it with this. I've been a fan of Marc Maron since I was 12 years old, which I think was something I shouldn't have told him face to face because, I'm in my 40s now and I'm 6'3", kind of like a full head taller than him, telling him this. And he's just looking at me like, really? That's what I needed to hear today? But tell me if I'm wrong in trying to describe him as almost a hopeful nihilist.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, definitely hopeful, more hopeful now, I'd say, in his career and in his life. Nihilist, I don't know. He maybe it's. I think he's definitely read that before. But I think hopeful curmudgeon, maybe I would say.
Yeah. Like the documentary is fantastic, and you can see him going through the situation with Lynn passing away. I mean, we're not giving anything away on that. We know she passed away in 2020. A couple of months into COVID from a rare blood disorder. And, this was like his final, it felt like from his description, it was his final chance at love and it was finally working for him. And here he loses her. But, Marc's career, like Marc himself confesses that he's not as, a huge like Chappelle level or Keniston level comic, but that doesn't mean that he isn't successful. I mean, he's had the WTF podcast, which has been a huge success. He's very well recognized. He's been on several TV shows and movies. Is it that, from your perspective and having spent so much time with him, is it that he doesn't feel where he's, where he is was good enough, or he should have been further along success-wise?
Well, I mean, he's talked about it at length about how, in his 20s and 30s and even 40s a little bit, he had a lot of, it was a roller coaster of his career, it was some ups and lots of downs. And I think maybe he lost, some time there. But he was always relevant. Like you said, you'd heard about him when you were young, and he was on Conan a bunch, and, just never really broke through, I think, to be, one of those top guys, I guess, when you think of stand-up comics in the 2000s, like Louis and Chris Rock and certain people. He is there now. Let's just say that. I think as much as he doesn't want to, he still wants to think of himself as a bit of an outsider. I think there's no doubt that this last special, specifically, definitely put him in a different category, and I think he is absolutely there, and I hope he can see that and understand that.
I hope so too, because I've been a fan of him for so long. And with this documentary coinciding, it premiered at South by, and coinciding with the end of WTF, and kind of going into the next phase of Marc's career, it's interesting to see how that transition is happening, especially with what you followed him along during that time period. Is there something that you recognized that he didn't quite see in himself as you were going through this process?
I think in terms of what I recognized in him, I think it's something that just kind of came out naturally, and that I would ask him certain questions that I knew would spark something in him. Is the comparing yourself to others thing, and I wanted to get underneath that and why he does that and why other performers tend to do that. But no, I think in terms of I wanted to show a softer center of Marc, and I knew it was there, and I experienced it while making the film. And when the camera is rolling, it's sometimes hard. A performer like Marc, who's always usually in control, wants to put himself out in a way. Not that he's not himself the same on enough stage, but it takes time. You got to wear him down a little bit. That's the documentary. Just me there with a camera, and I just keep showing up, and eventually, those walls start to crumble. And I think he appreciates that I showed all facets of him. Maybe a little rough around the edges and mean to me at times in the film, but I think that wouldn't be a true Marc Maron documentary if you didn't see some of that.
No, that's definitely for sure, but it's also very raw in a sense of almost being naked and exposing himself to the world and like this is who I am, this is what I've suffered, this is what I continue to suffer. And but it's still, this hopeful aspect to it in that we're rooting for Mark all the way through.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's yeah, the people who were listening to the podcast at the time when Lynn had passed away, had already an insight into his state of mind. This is sort of an additional, project related to that time in his life. But again, it's not a Lynn Shelton documentary. It's Mark going through grief and dealing with it in a very personal and honest way. It was, at times felt, it felt uncomfortable for me sometimes. It felt uncomfortable for me in the edit to decide what to use and what not to use. It was a real challenge, because you're dealing with somebody dealing with an immense loss. So it was a great responsibility that we had with this film, and hopefully we lived up to it.
Was there something that you really wanted to include in the documentary that ended up on the cutting room floor because it just didn't fit the narrative, or it felt like it might have been a little too sensitive, or could have been taken disrespectful by the audience?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot, there was so much that was filmed, 3.5 years of making this documentary. There's a lot of different threads you can pull and so many different places you can go with it. Specifically around the passing and his dealing with the grief after, we were very careful not to, like, again, make it a documentary about her or really her loss. It was more him dealing with it. So we didn't want to get into any, details in that realm, keep things a little vague, out of respect for her family and people who knew her.
No, that's absolutely wonderful, and you did a wonderful job with that as well. You're primarily known for doing comedy specials and working on other series. When you kind of shift into documentary mode, and you've worked with Mark before, how do you separate yourself from friend and becoming documentarian?
Well, with Mark, we weren't really, I wouldn't say we were friends when I first started making it. I've known him since like 2010, and we've always been like around each other. And he was nice to me over the years. But we became closer as while we were making the film, and that was tricky. But I must say, I never changed the sort of mission in making a film that was honest and real, and if anything, I think he trusted me more. And when I got that trust, I didn't want to squander it, and I wanted to make sure he he was happy with the film, his audience is happy with the film, a new audience would be happy with the film. It's, you don't want to make something for your subject, they just like it as a puff piece, and we really, really tried hard not to make that, because nobody wants to see a Marc Maron puff piece documentary. So the one thing that he didn't like, which he jokes about it, or he's talked about it a bunch, but the people in the documentary they're making fun of him the whole time. All the interviews are mostly like poking fun at him, as opposed to being like he's a genius or anything like that, which you see in a lot of these celebrity biodocs about how great everybody is, and I think we don't need another one of those.
Well, there was one scene, and this is probably the only spoiler I'm going to give, is where he's in his kitchen and he's teasing you about wanting to animate the Kennison story. And I thought
Yeah.
that was just a hilarious moment because it was very raw and it did feel very real. And it's interesting how, I flip it is the right word. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got kicked out of the group because, the drug dealer told me this and there was a Satanist involved." And I was like, how do you just glance over a Satanist and a drug dealer telling you, "Yeah, maybe it's time for you to leave"?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, that was a nice, like, quick summary of that story. And if anybody wants to hear those longer stories of Mark, he's written them in his memoir and his old podcast episodes, and but yeah, there were so many of those moments that we filmed throughout where it was sort of that meta, breaking the fourth wall, making fun of me and giving me a hard time. That we got a handful in there, but there could have been a whole movie of just that. But it would have been an entirely different film. Couldn't have been.
Right. And Panicked was a great special, and to come, with that, and then that coinciding with the end of WTF, how do you find the balance of doing a comedy special while filming a documentary, and what was the catalyst to get the documentary done?
Yeah, well, we were filming From Bleak to Dark. I did that one for HBO, and I did Panic, but From Bleak to Dark was while we were making the documentary, and that was yeah, that was a challenging week. But a lot with comedy specials is prep. So when you show up on the day, you're pretty much your team is ready to go. It's not entirely difficult work for a director on the day of the shoot. It just, the adrenaline is about it, but all the work has mostly been done leading up to that point. Um, and what was the second part of that question?
Yeah. What was the catalyst to shoot a documentary?
The catalyst to shoot the documentary was well, Julie Seabaugh, one of our producer and story editor on the film. She came to me during the pandemic, and she's like, "What about a Marc Maron doc? This is the time." And I was apprehensive at first, and obviously don't want to be callous about the grief and all that, and figuring out how to approach it in a tasteful way. But it did feel like the best way into a documentary about Marc Maron, as opposed to doing a typical celeb bio doc about how we got here and all that kind of stuff. So
Right. With everything that's going on and how his career is on that upward trajectory again, we went from the valley and we're climbing the mountain to the peak again. Is it exciting for you to see the reaction that he's getting while he still doesn't seem to appreciate is not the right word, fully recognize it?
yeah, I mean, I think he does recognize it. I think he doesn't maybe always admit it, but it is so fun to see people catch on and be like, some people are like, "Oh, where has he been?" All of a sudden, and it's like, "Oh, he's been there the whole time. He's been saying this stuff, but he's just doing it on these podcasts that a new audience is listening to." And and again, I haven't mentioned it yet, but the WTF never went video, and I think because it stayed an audio only podcast, it got passed over a bit in terms of its cultural relevance in some ways, I guess you could say, with some other comedy podcasts that did go video. I think they stayed true to what they did and didn't waver, and I think it made the audience who loved it and stayed with it. But with changing times, it's harder to go viral on an audio clip than it is on a YouTube thing. So yeah, that was tricky. But Mark is as relevant, if not more relevant than ever. There's no doubt.
Well, he was the first comic to get a president on a podcast.
That's right.
You
That's
know?
right. Yeah.
I mean, Rogan recently did it, and but Mark was the first to do it. And I know, Mark isn't a big fan of that Austin comedy scene,
Yeah.
but it's interesting to see, like I can dip my toe in both worlds because I've come from the world of combat sports, but I've always appreciated Mark and John Mulaney and Bill Hicks and that level of comedy. So it's interesting to see, like, to be able to relate to both sides and then realizing not everybody gets along, but it's also subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't, and again, you don't have to pick sides. I mean, it's like, I don't think Mark is specifically against the Austin comedy scene. I think he pokes fun. He likes to poke the bear a little bit and see and get a response. But I think he's telling it like it is, and in terms of like the comedy scenes, yeah, I mean things are shifting politically, things are shifting. Some comedians are feeling like a little bit more of like a mouthpiece of an administration. It seems, I could be wrong. Seems like it. Whenever that happens, it's not usually great for the arts and comedy in general. But that's just how it goes. Things shift.
Yeah. So when this premiered at South by, what was the audience reaction there? Because that's the Austin crowd right there is obviously going to be different than the New York and LA crowd when it opens up on October 3rd and then nationwide on the 5th and 8th.
An Austin Marc Maron crowd is a little different than an Austin, other comedy crowd. Yeah, so it was a great response. It was a really loving response. We had some wonderful people there that showed up, and Richard Linklater showed up, and a lot of like great Austin filmmakers as well came and supported. And it was a loving room. It was really, really great. And, we played it in Tribeca, New York. Obviously, New York audience loved it. But it's a film that's it's heavy. It's not. I mean, not like any Marc Maron doc's going to be light, but going into it knowing that it is not just not just a comedy doc, laugh every 10-second thing, that we're going to actually deal with some adult themes and real, real subject matters, as
Right.
opposed to, tour doc.
But that's what made it appealing. It wasn't a fluff piece. It wasn't, it wasn't shticky. It
Yeah.
was Mark being Mark and allowing himself to be vulnerable in this situation, and whittling down 3 years to an hour and a half almost seems like an impossible task.
Yeah, that was hard. I mean, like I've said before, it could have easily been a two-parter. It could have been a 3-hour thing, easily. But I don't think anybody wanted that. I think keeping it to an hour and a half was the way to go. But there were so many great scenes that didn't make it in. But hopefully we'll be able to release some things, and when the film comes out, deleted scenes online and things like that. Because man, what's on the cutting room floor is pretty great, I gotta say.
Well, I'm a physical media guy, so I would love to have it as like Blu-ray features.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do that. I know we were talking with our distribution company about doing some sort of a physical release.
As a filmmaker, you always learn something about yourself while making a documentary. What's something that you learned about yourself through the process in following Mark around for these 3 years?
Well, I guess, I mean, I always knew I had a threshold for taking lumps here and there, but I think I realized that I really I not desensitized to it, but I think I'm able to, yeah, I definitely found that I was able to have a pretty high threshold, and um I'm way more patient in a lot of respects, and than I thought I was. And at the same time, I was stressed out of my mind about how to get the money to finish the film. So, there's the actual making of it, which was a joy, which I love, but then like the business side of it is just so hard. And in this state of the industry currently, where we're at with independent film and independent documentaries, it's really, really difficult. Even with a relatively famous guy, it's not a guarantee. So
Before I let you go, and I really appreciate your time today, Stephen, if there's one thing you'd want an audience to pinpoint and go, all right, now I'm starting to understand Marc Maron, what would it be from the documentary, Are We Good?
I mean, I would say just just him and his cats, and the one-on-one with him and Charlie or Sammy, and you see them, how he talks to them, and how he interacts with them, and why these cats act the way they do, because of that. But I think he's yeah. Outside of the joke of that, is just that Mark is a complex, you know truth telling, good guy who's taken a lot of hits in his life, and he's come out the other end of it, and dealt with some serious loss, and is able to speak about it in a profound way. And I just hope people, when they see the film, will take something from the dealing with the grief. And even if down the road, everybody experiences grief in some way. So if you're able to take even a nugget of something from Mark, I think that's helping people, and that'd be great.
I will be fully honest. I would be that guy that would love to hang out with Mark, and Mark would be completely annoyed with me the entire time. So I kind of felt your pain through the documentary. I was like, yeah, I'd get that reaction, probably something worse. So, but
It's all love. It's all love. He's a yeah. He likes the fun.
Stephen Feinartz, thank you so much for your time today. Where can we find you in the documentary on social media if we want to connect with you?
Yeah, it's on the Instagram, where Are We Good Film, and then you can find me at Steven Feinartz on Instagram, and then the website for the film, where you can go find it screening everywhere, is arewegoodmarin.com.
Stephen Feinartz, thank you so much. Are We Good? A fantastic documentary following Marc Maron's journey through grief and coming out, I would say, triumphant on the other side. You're never over grief completely, but there is the hope that is within there. It's coming to New York and LA October 3rd, and then nationwide in expansion October 5th and 8th. Congratulations. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I did my best not to give any spoilers because I was that giddy watching it.
I appreciate it, RC. Thanks, man. Thanks so much.